Howard Snow, a retired Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel, consults as a Federal Business Access Coordinator for defense firms. He has more than 30 years of military business and federal government experience. He commands a solid understanding of the federal budget cycle and its impact on building business strategies. Howard has served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Installations, Facilities, and Energy, and is currently a fellow at George Mason University's Center for Infrastructure, Protection, and Homeland Security. Tom Jones, a retired Navy captain, is president of the Federal Business Navigators, a Washington, D.C. area-based consulting firm specializing in government affairs, business development, and public relations. Like Howard, Tom is currently a fellow at George Mason University's Center for Infrastructure Protection and Homeland Security, and most recently, Tom served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Reserve Affairs. He was also Special Assistant and Senior Advisor to the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. Tom and Howard, we thank you so much for being with us today to share your insights and knowledge on how to sell green into the federal government. Take it away.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks, Stacey. We're glad to be here.
This is Howie. Getting started on the why to get into the federal government, using them as a leverage for your business. I'd like to hit 4 quick points. Why the federal government, how to get started, doing your research, and the branding and marketing phase to help you, step into the federal marketplace.
Now, we realize that some of those of you listening have got varying degrees of experience in the federal marketplace. Some of you are brand new. You want to enter into the government to start selling your products or services to the government, while others of you have already been there and are looking to expand. So we're going to try and keep our remarks oriented to both groups so that we can hopefully provide some insight that will be useful for you.
So why the federal marketplace? The government has a systematic way of doing business. They actually help you, answer those questions, and that being the biggest one, why the federal marketplace. So they'll throw those answers out there. They'll throw the questions out there for you. They'll basically teach you how to do business, with the federal government. And they're going to ask you, how do I buy your product or services? Plus, on top of all that, there's a great opportunity, as Tom just mentioned, for teaming. So whether you're new to the process, you can actually find somebody, another firm that can use your products and services, and that could be the first step into the federal government by teaming with someone else.
Now, if you see on that slide where we say answer your questions quickly, remember when we're talking quick in terms of government speak, that could be a lot longer than those of us out in private industry would think it's quick.
And, as an example, again, why the federal marketplace? Just look at the budget here of a couple of folks around the D.C. area, the individual bases. You see the amount of dollars from last year's budget that they actually spend. Could your products or services be offered and actually help your company get a slice of some of those dollars that you see up there? And, getting started, how do you get started? You have to go into those databases, get yourself registered. You've got to do a little bit of homework here, and get your firm into those databases so that the government agents can actually look in there and find out who you are.
Yeah, the CCR is the big one, where they need to be able to see that you've gone in, you've registered your NAICS code, the North American Industry Classification System code that tells what kind of product or services you have to offer. Once you've registered on the CCR website, you'll get a cage code. Those are all things they're going to ask about and you're going to need as you respond to proposals or as you actually go in and get a national stock number assigned once you have a government sponsor that will request that for you.
And doing your research, this one is basically simple. It's something that you should do every day for your company, or someone in your firm should be doing this for you. And it can be as simple as a Google search. Get on there and do your research for that particular agency. What are they looking for? What do they need? So like I said, you do your research. You find those mission statements. You find out what the focus is of where right down to your individual base beside you or a particular service in general. And when I say service, we're concentrating here today on the 800-pound gorilla, which is DoD.
Yeah, now, one thing to remember when we're talking about the DoD is you should become very familiar with the Defense Logistics Agency. Many of you either already are doing business with the government, with DoD through DLA, Defense Logistics Agency, or will need to do that. So their website, www.dla.mil, is their main website, and then they have other related websites that will talk to you specifically about how to do business with the government that you should become intimately familiar with.
Branding and marketing. This is where you want to do this at a couple different levels. You want your company to be recognized by that particular base, that particular agency within inside of DoD or the services. So you need to focus on agency leadership, the action officers, the base TO, and you need to get your products and services out there. And we like to encourage our clients to actually have a trifold or a one-page concept statement paper, as a leave behind when you have those meetings and those introductions.
Yeah, that capability statement is extremely important to have. Government people are awful busy, and if they've got a one-pager that they can look at, can be front and back, it's real helpful. When we talk about the political types of people that you want to be talking to, it's your local congressman's a key one here. And when we think about Congress, we think about earmarks. Well, that's a more than four-letter word right now that's not in vogue, but we're not talking about going and trying to get money specifically put into congressional legislation saying buy from your company. We're talking about the fact that your congressman may, or his staff more accurately, may be able to help if you start running into problems with meetings or other issues with federal agencies.
And as a quick example of branding and marketing, we took a biofuel company and we actually introduced them to the right people inside of the federal government. And in this particular case, you'll see a couple names up there. Well, what we did was we introduced them to what we thought were the appropriate people, which turns out to be right. In this particular case, the first name you see up there is Admiral Phil Cullum, who's director of the Navy's Task Force Energy, and he directed that their product actually go to the fuels, Navy fuel test bench and start the process to get them certified to go in Navy equipment, in this case the F-18 and Navy generators.
Now another example is a client I've worked with, which is Excel, who makes the high-speed, energy-efficient, made-in-the-USA hand dryers that we've taken into various levels of the government, both for them to be educated on what the government's looking for, what their energy mandates are, as well as getting them branded and to help them market. And it's taking them to key leaders throughout government here in the D.C. area, plus it's going to various conferences and introducing them to decision makers, from conferences like the National Guard Conference on down to conferences like GOVgreen that they came to last year, where they've got a wide look at the decision makers in the D.C. area. So more general to the more specific conferences to show them why hand dryers, that are high-speed and energy efficient are needed in government. And at this point, I think we're ready to take and answer a few questions from some of you that have been coming in. Turn it back over to Stacey.
Yeah, thank you, Tom and Howard, for putting together this wonderful presentation. Before we do jump into those questions, I did want to take a moment to point out just a couple things. Number one, this webinar really is a sneak peek at the top-notch exhibitor education that will take place at the GOVgreen Conference and Exposition coming up November 30th and December 1st in Washington, D.C. If you'd like to get more information on that event, you can visit us online at govgreen.org. And then secondly, for those in the audience who would like to sit in on a more advanced session, Part 2 and Part 3 of this mini-series with Tom and Howard will be hosted on the GOVgreen website for future viewing. And the next two presentations are going to take you through a detailed 13-step process on how to be even more successful in the government marketplace. So having said that, we're going to jump into some of these questions that had come across through the session. First one up is kind of touching on that timing thing. We really need to get some government contracts quickly. So how long can we expect before we could, get a reasonable contract?
Okay, quickly, as I said earlier, is a relative term. What we found with many of our clients and talking to other companies is quickly in terms of the government depends on what it is you're trying to sell and where they are in their procurement process. It can take upwards of a year or more at times before an RFP, a request for proposal, comes out, or to build the kinds of relationships to where you've shown that your product or service is something that someone needs to get as a sole source contract without even worrying about going through the competitive process. They're lengthy, and it does take patience. Now, there are going to be exceptions and things can happen quick, but that's not the norm within the government, as most of you would expect.
Okay, here's another question that I actually hear a lot when I'm talking to folks within the SEAL network, which is, we're not on a GSA schedule, and the fear that will this keep us from getting a government contract. Is that really true?
You don't have to be on the GSA schedule, although it does help, because the agencies, the individuals inside the federal government will actually go there and look for products and services, and it also serves as a vehicle to help them get things easier, if you will, or access that company's products and services easier. But one little tidbit I'd like to throw out to people is 1/3 of all government contracts are sole source. That means the government agency has a need and they go directly to that firm, and that firm may not be on the GSA schedule. So, if they have the need, if they have the pain point, if you will, they can go directly to that individual firm for that product or service.
Okay, and we have about time for maybe one more question, and this comes from a company that says that they're a startup, and they just want to know what should be our first step towards getting recognized as a government supplier.
Again, that branding and marketing that we talked about earlier, you want to get out there. You want to have that concept statement, that trifold from your company. You want to get into, whether it's the base CO, the contracting office at that base, or if it's a larger concept and you want to do a broader brush reach, then you want to get into the Pentagon and actually talk to the individual leaders in certain offices there.
Now, and I'm going to make this a first step /2 or 3 almost simultaneously, is how we was discussing. We talked about earlier, you need to get into that database and you need to get a cage code. The government's not going to really start doing much work with you unless you're in that CCR database, so be sure and do that. The other one is you need to start looking at what conferences and exhibits, shows, make sense to go to. You can spend an awful lot of money going to all kinds of shows and not get a lot of bang for the buck. So as I mentioned with my comment about the high-speed, energy-efficient hand dryer guys, Excel, that we were able to target them into both broad scope shows where a lot of people come to do a lot of branding of their product, and into targeted shows like with the National Guard, where they could go in and talk to the decision makers, the people that actually make the purchasing decisions, to start building and strengthening those relationships that take time, to where it's not just a company that somebody reads or hears about, it's a company that they've met, they've got a good feeling for them, and when they look at past performance, we'll talk about in a later webinar, that that's what gets the government excited about using a particular company's services or products. So like I said, we try to get them to GOVgreen, National Guard Conference, the Society of American Military Engineers. Another client we've got, Beta LED up in Wisconsin, that finds a lot of success going to these conferences.
All right, well, I think that's about all the time that we have for today's webinar. We would like to say that if anybody in the audience has further questions, we definitely encourage you guys to submit those online. There's an email address on your screen right now, info@govgreen.org. Please go ahead and send those questions on in, and we will get those answered for you. Thank you again to both Tom and Howard for being here with us today, and we hope everybody has a wonderful day. Bye-bye.